Hey there, and welcome back to the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm. I'm Kathy, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a project to help keep the heat out and the cool in. And as you may have noticed, my air conditioner is going right now because it's really rather hot here in Oregon. In fact, the last couple days it's been record-breaking temps, and we're looking to see possibly like 113 degrees in what I call the valley in very western Oregon. And today we got up to about 100. Yesterday was 113. So sometimes when we think about heat, or even on the other hand, cold, we need to be able to help insulate things in our home in a little bit different way, rather than just putting in a heater, because sometimes that can add for a bigger electric bill. And so there's some different creative ways that we can help our windows and our homes become a little bit more insulated. And one of those things that I have found is that either you can have double-lined curtains that are rather thick material, and you can hang those. Or I've also found a material that looks a little bit like this. And this is one side. It's a little bit quilted, you can see. Kind of quilted there and here. But then the other side is like this. It's a little bit different color, but as you can see, there's some layers to it. And with each of these layers, this one has a bit of a white batting on both sides with a bit of a metal shear to it, like a metal material. And then there's like an insulated metal. I mean, it's not really metal, it's like like a plastic. And then we have another set of batting, and then kind of a finished material. And so with these layers, it actually helps helps soundproof your windows, helps heat or cool on the right sides of things, depending on what the weather's doing outside. And in my case, right now, I'm really wanting to help my house stay cool. And I have a big window right here that can really afford to help. It has a lot of opportunity for heat and cool to kind of go back and forth more than I'd like. And in my case, I just naturally don't like having curtains on my windows until something like this happens, where I need to have more cool inside and heat outside, or the reverse, having more warmth inside in the winter versus cold on the outside. And so with that in mind, today's project actually will help with two seasons, the summer and the winter. And so what I'm going to do is kind of show you guys a little bit of a step-by-step process of how to make something of a curtain. And in this case, this particular curtain you can hang in a couple of ways. I'm on the edge of being lazy just to get it up, because I want to make sure that my house can start to stay cool. But what we can do is have it go through a traditional rod, and then we'll make a little a setup for that. Or if you don't have the means of having a traditional curtain rod, we can also find different ways to hang it, using things like alligator clips, or even some other options like Velcro. Or if you just get dire, you can use a staple gun, just depending on how you're feeling. But let's get started on how we can do this cool project, and hopefully we'll be able to get a cool project by the end of it. Okay, so here we are. We're started with our layout of our material. So this is the material that I'll be having as my curtain material, and then this material is the material I showed you before, that's the insulation. And basically what I've done is I've laid it out so that this is underneath this, and then this material then will fold around on top of this again, kind of like a material sandwich. And I've done that because I want to make sure that there is a bit of a layering system, so that I have wrong sides together when it's flipped around. And so what I've done is I've decided that this is a right side and this is a right side, and when put together, when folded, they are now going to be right sides together. So it's folded in this way, and when I lay it all out flat, I'll be able to take it and maneuver it a little bit more over to my sewing machine. And so what I'm going to do first is essentially make a seam about here, so I can make sure that the insulation here is attached to this material. And then from there I will fold this in half about like that, so then I can make a bit of a seam here, reinforcing the insulation to the material, but also creating a hole for a curtain rod. And then when I'm done, I can actually then come here and have this kind of folded out this way, so it ends up being a nice edge. And what I can do is put it on this window and have enough edge to go from here all the way over to there, and have a little hangover and hopefully help keep it all nice and insulated. So let's get to the sewing machine. Okay, so to help you maneuver this a little bit better, I'm going to show you what I've done to move this from this location to my sewing machine. And so what I did is I laid out my materials, both the insulation and my fabric that I want to use, right sides together. So this is the wrong side of the internal material, and this is the right side. So now I will have right side to right side, and what I'm going to do is fold that slightly, and on this side take it and kind of roll it up a little bit. I'm going to lay it out slightly, but as I roll it, this will help me to not only carry it, but see where I need to line things up when I sew. And then it helps me not have to use pins. And you can use pins if you want to make a lineup of pins and measure things exactly to make sure everything stays put that way. But this is one way to help you then, once we roll it all over, pick it up and bring it here. So let's get to that step. So now you can kind of see I'm loving on my curtain. I'm getting closer to making sure that it's coming together. So as you can see, I have it in still a little bit of a roll with this as the insulation and material. Now it's kind of a wrong side to wrong side. And as I unfold it, you'll see how it will kind of help unfold in my lap as I push it through the machine. So as you may notice, I have to pull through a little bit because there's a lot of bulk here. And so as I go along, I'll start to unroll this part, but I'll have to keep pushing through to make sure that the bulk gets through. Now this thread that I'm using isn't the thickest of threads. I probably should have used a thicker thread. So if you have that opportunity, that would probably be wise. This happens to be a quilting thread, so it's not quite as heavy. But it'll do, I think, for now. So right here I had to take a little bit of a pause because things had gotten all bunched up. So sometimes if you find that you have a lot of things just bunching underneath the presser foot, right under there, just take the time to lift up your presser foot, let things release, and you may even need to raise the needle to help kind of decrease the tension as well. But once you get that back on track, keep on plugging with the sewing. So now that I've come towards the end of where I'll be sewing here, you'll see just how the width of my presser foot is really not that much off what I have for part of my seam that you can see the stitching back here. But when we come and we're finishing here, I'm pulling and pushing at the same time, and I'll come through and you'll see I'll just go to just over the edge of the silver here. I'm about 2 steps, maybe now 3 beyond that. And what I'm going to do is on my particular machine, we have this handy dandy button here. That's a reverse. I'm just going to press that as I come back here, and you'll see it starts going backwards. And then I'll release that reverse button and come back forward again. And by doing that, that helps tack it down just a little bit further in that position. Okay, so now we have our piece off the machine, and you can see that I've kind of turned it right side out. So this is the right side of the insulation, which will ultimately be the back side, the part that goes towards the window. And you can see here that this is the seam that we just created, and I flipped the good material around to the other side. So I've created a little bit of a seam, and this will be the right side. And so what we're going to do next is create a bit of a reinforcement here to help the material stay better. And it's something of a quilting trick that I learned to kind of have a reinforced, what I learned is stitch in the ditch. So we're going to actually go right in that line between the good material that's on the outside and the insulation on the back side to help reinforce our material. Then what we're going to do is make sure that we have another seam, so to speak, that we're going to put another seam right about here. And what that's going to do is allow it for a curtain rod to go right in there. So in case you feel like hanging this, you can, but you can also hang it, put Velcro on this side. If you're not interested in doing much more sewing after that, or hooking up things on your wall, you can put Velcro right in about there, or you can even use the alligator clips and hang them from the top. So just so you can see a little bit closer where exactly I'm sewing for the stitch in the ditch, you really want to go on that very corner there of your material, that is your outside material, or the one that's going to show. Now what I'll show you in just a minute is that if you don't get just on the edge of this material to catch it along the seam, it does kind of have a little bit of a wobble to it. But on one hand it's okay, on the other hand you just want to make sure that the most of your seam is all consistent. Consistency is kind of important. As I'm coming to the very end of this portion of the seam, I am going to be actually continuing on this without the 2 parts and just the one here. And I'm going to do that because I'm using this excess part as part of a covering, you might say, for a wider window in case I need it. So I'm making this treatment so that I can have it on a couple of size windows. So you'll see in just a moment how I'll do that. Just as a little trick, you'll see here that I'm holding my thumb. Actually, I don't want to move it, but you'll see that I'm holding here at the edge of my sewing machine, so that when I start having some tension and consistency, I want to make sure that I have this fold the same consistency throughout towards the end of my piece, because you'll see that I'm coming towards the end, and if I don't stay consistent, my seam up here can get all waggly, and we want a little bit of looking nice. So we're done with this particular seam, and now that we're on seeing this side, you kind of can't tell, thankfully, because of the white thread on the light material, that this, believe it or not, right here is our seam. And so we can kind of see a little bit closer. It's a little blurry, kind of, sort of. You can kind of see the seam. Now, thankfully, and purposely why we chose the white, was so that we would be able to not see the seam so much, but that it could hold nice and tight. And so now it's that's the kind of cool part. You can see that it's been sewn, but you don't know any of the details, which is so as we got looking at this side, so now we've had this piece sewn to this twice. And what I did on one end was finish the end with the seam you can kind of see here as I turn it around. Oops. You can kind of see how I've finished this as it was here, but without the insulation. And the part of the reason I'm doing that is that in the next part, when I have a spot for the curtain rod, that this part and on the other side, I've made it so that they can actually collapse a little bit, and it actually can adjust to different size windows. So then you can have it extended out, maybe an additional 2-ish, 1.5 feet, 2 feet on this side, and about the same on the other side. So just all told, we have about 2 yards of this fabric and about 1 yard of this fabric. So when we have that, it ends up being 2 yards across with half of that equidistant in this. Now the reason why I did it in the middle is because most windows that I would use this on are not going to be that much wider. So that's why it's going to be a good 1 yard wide, or 3 feet, approximately 3 feet wide. It would probably be the largest window that I'd actually put this on anyway. Most of them will be smaller. So that's why I chose a yard of the insulation and about 2 yards of the material. Now I'll insert here that the material I got for about $5 at Goodwill. So yeah, this material was nice, kind of I thought it was very nice. I like the pattern. I was intending it for one project, but now I'm using it for this. And for about $5, this really suited my needs for my budget, and I was able to use it for a different project now than what I originally did. Now, this was a little bit more expensive. When I went to get it today, June 28th, 2021, Joann's Fabric had this priced at $34.99. It was on sale for $24.99, but because I bought 2 yards of this, one for this window and one for another one, in addition to some other items, I was able to get 40% off my purchase and an additional $15 off because it was over $75. So I was able to bring the price down even a little bit more. The other items I got for another project out in my garden. So that's kind of fun. So that's where the finances part of self-reliance comes into this picture. I am on a budget, I don't know about you, and I want to make sure that my money goes the farthest. So in this case, this particular project is costing me roughly $20. And that's about it. And to help keep heat in the winter inside and cool in the summer inside, it's just a one-time flat fee of $20. That'll help out my electrical bill in the long run a bit pretty well. So keeping that in mind, that when we have a budget for a project such as this, it'll help us in the long run, and it kind of plots out what do we want to use where. And so having some insulation like this and knowing about a product like this is really helpful, because sometimes you may not have the means of being able to get a new heating system or cooling system. As a matter of fact, I just met up with a man at the store the other day. As it was 108, 109 outside, he said it was 92 degrees in his house. And he was like, no air conditioning. Luckily, he had some shade with his trees around, but he had a dog, he had his cats, himself in the house, and it was a bit of a struggle, it sounded like, for heat-wise. And so having something like this to put on your windows can help kind of keep down or bring down the temperatures from being so excessive on a hot day like this. So as we get going, we're going to finish this up, The next step will be to basically make another seam here so that we can insert, in case we want to, we can insert a curtain rod here, or you can use clips, remember, to then hang it up. So with that in mind, I'm going to tootle on off and finish this, the seam that I'm going to put right about here, and I'll show you next how that turns out. So in our last bit today, we're going to be doing our last bit of a seam, you might say, to help put in our curtain rod. And Yarsan over here is going to help us out too. But what we're going to do first is create a little bit of a finished edge, kind of a mock edge. And we're going to take this corner, fold it in just slightly, like that. And from there, we're going to kind of fold this edge over once, and then one more time. And by doing this, it helps create an edge that will kind of fall down the rest of your curtain in a little bit better way. So we're going to take this and create our last part, and then we're going to come down and track this for just about 6-8 inches at the end. So then this part can be nice and slick as well. But we want to make sure that we get this seam first across here. So with that in mind, let's get started. We're going to take this and put it right back under here. And for the width that I want, I'm literally going to keep my my edge just over this metal plate. So that's going to be my guideline over here, and that's going to be from the center of my needle, where my needle is, my center of my foot, to the outside edge is about 2.5, 3 inches. And that's kind of just where I want to be. So I'm going to put my needle down, put my presser foot down, and get started. As we come up to this setup with the insulation, I just want to point out that part of the reason why I'm making this pocket here for the curtain rod is so that we can end up coming over this part. So you'll have to make an insert, a little cut on this side of the material. Make sure it doesn't come through this side, or else it won't work. So you want to take care to just make one insert here as we get closer to that point, so that when you have your curtain rod, it can come through the hole here and over this part. Now, if we were being really technical, we probably could have done something fancier, like a buttonhole type idea, or made some sort of hole that would be a little bit fancier and sturdier, but this will do for what we're doing today. So at the other side of this, now that we're at this end of this seam, we want to make sure that we get the second side of what we did on the opposite side. So we're going to finish this by turning this corner in slightly and then doing a kind of a double tuck. Now, in doing it this way, it helps kind of make things look a little bit finished with relatively little effort. I'm doing a little curve like this, kind of goes a long ways. So we can see that it's kind of tucked in. It's a little, ends up being a little bit cleaner. But noticing that these were sticking out, we can tuck them in a little bit better. So there we go. And then we're going to finish this off simply like that. And like I did on another piece, I'm going to do a little bit of a reverse and go back over this to help it stay together. By having that double reinforcement, it helps things to not undo as quickly or as often. So from here, what I'm going to do is actually just simply wireless dime here on this side. And normally we would take that thread off, but I can cut it off in just a moment with no problem. But what I'm going to do is take this last part and just tuck it under again to make sure it's all in, and get under the presser foot. It keeps being a little bit tricky. And again, this probably would be easier if we had, if I had some straight pins or something like that to help with it. But I don't have any with me, and it's just, for me, I'm not needing it to be too fancy. So then, as we get this down, we may have to tack this in a little bit first and give it a little extra because it's so thick. Yeah, and it's kind of getting stuck in there, so I gotta help pull it through. And we're gonna go through the center, and again, helping this kind of stick through down the line. And that's all. So now I'm going to take this knife and actually make a slit from the top seam down to just above this seam that you can barely see next to my thumb or my finger, so that when I want to, I can put in the curtain rod to then go from behind this piece of fabric into that piece of underneath the insulation. Now, part of the reason why I've decided to use this knife is to kind of just wiggle in behind one piece of material to get into the pocket that's there. So that's why I'm using that instead of a scissors, because I don't want to risk cutting both sides of the material. This is the little slit that hopefully will help if I ever want to put a curtain rod in. And it probably will just be one of the flat ones, the long flat ones, instead of the round ones that come around. Although the round one could possibly fit in there as well. It's about the size of my thumb. So this is what our curtain looks like to this point before it's hung up on the window. But I just wanted to show you that we have a little bit of a finished part here. You can see some of the basic things that we had sewn. We have this seam, two seams here, and then we have a bit of a finished edge here. So we ended up kind of rounding off there. So hopefully when we have this hung up, it'll look all neat and clean and help us keep heat or cold in depending on the season. So after trimming up some little edges and making sure things were straight, we now have, yay, the curtain up. And basically I attached it just simply with staples. And if we take a look, this is the final product of the curtain hanging in my living room. I was really pleased with how it turned out, and it was nice and neat and clean. I just was able to hang it up simply. So today's project that we did with the curtain actually kind of encompassed a couple of different areas of self-reliance. And that's why it's really hard for me to kind of discern sometimes what area is what. In this case, it really was budget related or finance related because I only had a small amount of money that I could spend. So I needed to solve a problem kind of quickly. So this particular project, since I only spent about $5 on the material at either St. Vincent de Paul's or at Goodwill, I forget which one I went and got it. But then also when I got the insulation, ended up only being about $20 after I got several discounts when I was at Joann's this morning. So I was able to get like $15 and 40% off my entire purchase. So this ended up only being a project that was about $25, which was a whew, thank goodness. And so then that also went into the bit of the side skills or education. Because of some skills that I learned along the way, I was able to learn how to do sewing on my own, so I didn't have to pay out for someone else to make this for me, or to have it already made for me by someone and have it in the store. In either case, if somebody else made it for me or if I bought it in the store, I think this would have been a lot more than $25, and I would have had to like kind of look at multiple different stores. So, with that in mind, remember that self-reliance can kind of cover a couple of different things, but it's all about how we solve the problem that we have. In my case, I wanted to be able to keep the heat out during this hot time during the summer. So come back if you have any questions or comments. Just put down in the comments below and subscribe to the Traveling Homesteader and come check us out at gyroscopefarm.com. It's always good to see you, and hopefully you'll come back and be able to learn some more things as we go along.